Welcome, everyone, to the NewVision, OldWays podcast, a greatly ambitious journey of discovery where we can all learn to live better, mentally healthier, and more fulfilling lives. If you're just discovering us, feel free to go back and take the journey from the beginning. And if you're already a NewVision, OldWays fan, welcome back and enjoy season
6.
And now, here is your host, Tony Marinaccio.
You are listening to NewVision, OldWays, the podcast that explores timeless wisdom for the modern mind in a fun, relaxed, and most important, interactive way with you, the listener. I am your host, Tony Marinaccio, and let's get the episode started. Welcome, Visioneers, to another great episode of the NewVision, OldWays podcast, and this is episode number 60. Yes, I do have the best fake studio audience ever. And yes, it is 60 episodes. It's a bit hard to believe sometimes, and I will say it again. I could not have done it without you. So listeners, thank you so much. It has been one hell of a ride to get here, and my love for this has only grown. So there is much more to come this year and hopefully farther. And my hope is that you keep listening, supporting the show. And folks, you will be able to support the show by donating through Patreon by the next episode. I will have that announced in the blog and the newsletter on the website as soon as possible. And so look for that. And if I am worthy of your praise, maybe you could tell the others to check it out, whoever your others are. And also, I hope that you have listened to the last episode. That's episode 59, The Cave in the Light, A Battle for Your Soul, because that one will set you up perfectly for what we will be talking about today. And also, I want to make clear why I am traveling down this road of ancient times at this moment. And when we look at the struggles we are having right now, not just in America, but all over the world, we can look back to the allegory of the cave that Plato warned us about, and how Aristotle's view was so different from Plato's, and how all of that now is history repeating itself. We talked about how the cave in the modern world is social media, agenda media, groupthink, coupled with a nihilistic nothing matters except how I feel view of the world, and how dangerous all of that really is. Plato, Aristotle, and ancient Greece may seem like a long time ago, but think about it. The struggles are the same. They are just in different packaging. This is why true history matters, because we can see clear parallel lines between then and now. The great philosophers of ancient Egypt were way ahead of their time, and the lessons, the warnings, the solutions that they presented about 2,400 years ago are as relevant today as they were then, maybe even more so now. As I stated in the past episodes, humans are just that, human. Our basic needs, wants, desires, hopes, and dreams are really the same. Not much has changed with that. What has changed is the technology, the in real time, twisted information that helps us jump to uninformed conclusions about what is happening everywhere. Take the Minneapolis situation, for instance, that's going on right now. The instant twisting of the truth to fit whatever narrative is being forced upon us, and the willingness by many to hear only what they want to hear to justify the manufactured rage they have been manipulated into. There is a lot to learn from here, and the last episode was a magnificent jumping off point. So, back to the ancient Greece portion itself. This civilization helped jettison the world into the modern times. And most importantly, encourage the things we are severely lacking right now. Free-thinking individuals who were encouraged to form and express their own opinions, who were encouraged to seek understanding of how life should be lived and engage in debate, exchange ideas, learn from each other, and in real time build a better civilization for everyone. Ancient Greece was not without its own dark underbelly, but this time in history gave us something that, quite frankly, we have lost. It gave us the warnings, the solutions, and the wisdom we need to get back to what made ancient Greece one of the most, if not the most influential philosophical civilizations the world has ever known. And there is no time better than right now to learn who we are and who we can become by exploring the amazing and wonderful world of ancient Greece. So let's start Episode 60, Ancient Greece, the Birth of the Questioning Mind.
Socrates begins as a curious gadfly in ancient Athens, whose defining moment is provoking the city to question itself through sharp dialogue. He sought virtue over wealth, wandering the streets to coach young thinkers and challenge the wisdom of rulers, a method that earned both friends and fierce critics. His trial and execution for impiety turned his ideas into a legacy that outlived him, inspiring later philosophers to pursue truth through questioning. His lasting impact is a culture of critical inquiry that laid the foundations for Western philosophy and ethical reasoning.
Where would we be without the ancient Greeks? From the birth of the classical sculpture to the philosophy of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, from the epic poetry of Homer to the development of democracy and the city-states, the ancient Greeks created one of the most advanced and still remarkable civilizations of antiquity. It may have flourished in the mid-centuries of the first millennium BC, but its influence still shapes much of the world today. Among many other things, ancient Greece gave the world the mathematics of Pythagoras, trial by jury, classical architecture, and the theater, and the Olympic Games. But to completely understand why Greece is so important, we must take a step back even further in time. Because before ancient Greece, the world was already ancient. Important civilizations, of course, existed. Case in point, Mesopotamia. It was the fertile region in the Middle East defined by the Tigris and the Euphrates River, considered to be the cradle of civilization, where the world's earliest advanced societies emerged, with innovations like writing, irrigation, the wheel, mathematics, astronomy, and relatively complex cities. This area roughly covers modern-day Iraq, parts of Syria, Turkey, and Iran. These civilizations not only existed, but cities rose with developments in agriculture and governance. Monuments were built and knowledge was more or less preserved. But here is the dividing line that made Greece so powerful. Before Greece, thought was not free to express or encouraged to happen at all. In places like Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt and other early empires, society was structured vertically, meaning that truth flowed downward and authority came from gods or kings. Social roles were fixed and stability mattered more than inquiry. Myth explained reality. Tradition preserved order, and obedience was key to keep the system intact. I think that ignorance is bliss fits perfectly right here. This old world view valued cosmic order, not individual reason. The individual existed inside the system, not as a builder of the system or a questioner of it. See a resemblance to communism or socialism in there? This is the structure from which Greece would break away from. Because as we have seen and are seeing, civilizations decay when questioning becomes forbidden. And modern society is repeating this pattern through cultural enforcement rather than overt force. Ancient Greece was not a unified nation. It was a collection of independent city-states, each running its own experiment in governance, culture, and social order. So geography played a major role here. Mountain ranges, isolated communities, city-states otherwise known as polis, developed independently. No single king dominates. So inevitably, trade exposes Greeks to many cultures with no single myth controlling all meaning. And then the revolution. People began asking questions publicly. Thank you to someone like Socrates, for instance, for that. Yes, that may sound a bit crazy, but that was revolutionary at the time in human history. And the questions were not just what the gods demand, but what is actual justice? What is truth? What is a good life? What makes a society fair? This is where Socrates walks the streets questioning everyone. This is where Plato imagines eternal truths beyond appearances. And this is where Aristotle insists on observation, logic, and categories. For the first time, truth is debated, authority is questioned, and reason becomes sacred. This is the modern birth of the unleashed conscious mind. Greece doesn't invent answers, it invents the right to just plain ask the questions. The most famous of these centers of debate was, of course, Athens. Up close observations, Athens was messy. Athens was imperfect. It excluded women, slaves, and foreigners from political life. So I am by no means saying that Greece in general was a utopia, but yet Athens did something no civilization had ever done before at scale. It created a public space for public thinking and speaking. The agora, the marketplace, became places where ideas were exchanged alongside goods. Citizens gathered not just to trade, but to argue, debate, persuade, and question. Now, Greece still had its moments of ignorant ancient thinking, like the death sentence of Socrates for apparently corrupting the minds of the youth known as Eusebia, or worshiping false gods and failing to worship the gods of Athens. So this was certainly not a perfect system, but even in this sometimes uneven state of affairs, ideas rose or fell not by lineage or by force, but by logic, persuasion, evidence, and rhetorical skill, which in turn gave birth to philosophy, formal logic, political theory, ethics, and scientific inquiry. It was also the birth of something even more fragile, the belief that human reason matters, that individuals are capable of understanding the world not perfectly, but responsibly. Thank you for that, Aristotle.
Ancient Greek philosophy stands as the cornerstone of Western thought. Within this realm of intellectual inquiry, names like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle shine as beacons of wisdom. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, challenged societal norms by urging people to question everything. He believed that true wisdom lies in acknowledging one's ignorance. His student, Plato, established the academy and wrote extensively on justice, politics, and the nature of reality. His famous allegory of the cave explored the concept of perception versus reality. Aristotle, another of Plato's students, delved into diverse fields, from ethics to biology. His systematic approach to logic and reasoning laid the foundation for scientific inquiry.
This intellectual freedom did not stay confined to philosophers. It completely spilled into Greek art, architecture, and especially theater. Greek tragedy wasn't just entertainment in the modern sense. It was a moral education through stories of kings, heroes, and gods. The audience was then free to explore pride and downfall, power and corruption, loyalty and betrayal, justice and injustice. Greek comedy, meanwhile, openly mocked politicians, elites, and public figures, something almost unthinkable in early civilizations. The Greeks understood something we often forget today. And this, my friends, is so very important. A society that cannot examine itself, that cannot question itself, that cannot laugh at itself is already decaying. Bring in cancel culture right here. The Greeks built theaters where their own political failures were dramatized. In tragedy, they wrote comedies that openly mocked those in power. They allowed philosophers to walk the streets asking uncomfortable questions, even when this freedom went too far, like when Socrates was executed by a democratic vote. It revealed something essential. The danger was not questioning itself, but the loss of tolerance for questioning, a lesson we still are learning today. That distinction matters because civilizations do not decay the moment criticism appears. They decay the moment criticism becomes forbidden, when speech must be controlled to preserve stability. What is really being preserved is not truth, but authority. And history shows us again and again, when authority becomes more important than truth, decay has already begun. We are seeing echoes of this today. In modern England, speech is increasingly regulated, not around action, but around expression. Words, opinions, jokes, and dissenting views, or silently praying, are treated as threats to social order. The idea that speech itself must be managed for the good of society is not new. It is ancient, and it has never ended well. In the United States, the mechanism is different, but the effect is similar. Rather than overt state control, we see cultural enforcement. Cancel culture does not require laws when it can rely on fear. Fear of losing your job, fear of social exile, fear of being labeled, reduced, or erased. This is not debate. This is not persuasion. This is compliance. And compliance has never produced wisdom. What makes this moment particularly dangerous is that it is often justified in moral language. Control is framed as compassion. Silencing is framed as safety. Mockery is framed as violence. And questioning is framed as harm. But a society that cannot tolerate being questioned is not morally confident. It is morally insecure. The Greeks understood that laughter was not an enemy of the truth. It was a test of it. If an idea cannot survive scrutiny, satire, or disagreement, it is not strong enough to guide civilization. And when speech becomes so narrow that only approved ideas may exist, thought itself begins to narrow with it. This is how decline begins, not with invasion, but with self-censorship. Not with collapse, but with conformity. Not with tyranny at first, but with the quiet agreement that some questions are no longer allowed to be asked. Ancient Greece reminds us that freedom of thought is not comfortable. It is risky, and it can be destabilizing, but it is also the only force that keeps societies alive rather than merely just functioning. The moment a culture decides that it must be protected from its own people's thoughts, it has already lost faith in itself. And when faith in reason disappears, what replaces it is not peace, but power. This is not progress. This is decay.
And now, Visioneers, let's take a quick break to let you know how you can support the show. By clicking on the support link in the show notes or at the NewVision OldWays.com website, you can show your support by donating directly to the NewVision OldWays podcast. These episodes take time and money to produce, and by donating what you are able to, it will allow us to grow the show and give you the best content that we can. Of course, you can cancel at any time. Thank you, and now, back to the show.
So, just before the break, I was talking about a significant reason why we see decay in any society. When we are conditioned not to ask questions, not to laugh at ourselves, to control thoughts and speech, you see a downward slide of any culture. And this is why I have brought up the issue with ideology grooming in education before, from kindergarten all the way through higher education. An important point here is that education in ancient Greece wasn't just about skills or employment. It was about shaping the whole person. Imagine that. Students studied rhetoric to speak clearly, logic to think clearly, ethics to live well, physical training to help cultivate discipline, music and poetry to refine the soul. Why? Because the Greeks believed, as I do, that a society can only be as strong as the character of its citizens. And that, my friends, is worth repeating. A society can only be as strong as the character of its citizens. This idea led directly to learning that never truly ends. And this is where we need to pause and talk honestly about what we're seeing on modern college and university campuses. Because when education stops forming the whole person, when it abandons rhetoric, logic, ethics, and discipline, something else rushes in to fill the vacuum, and that's emotion. Not cultivated emotion, not disciplined passion, but raw, unexamined, easily manipulated emotion. What we are witnessing on many campuses today is not organic student movements rooted in deep understanding. It is often something far more troubling. Outside agitators, ideological operatives, and activist networks that descend into campuses knowing exactly what they are looking for. Students who have been trained to feel strongly, but not to think rigorously. And if this feels uncomfortable to digest, it should. Ancient Greece warned us that comfort is not the goal of truth. And these students are not stupid. They are not inherently evil. They are unfinished, and unfinished, emotional, and weak minds are easy to recruit. When young people have never been taught how to debate, how to reason, how to define their terms, or how to question their own assumptions, they become vulnerable to emotional manipulation. They are given slogans instead of arguments, labels instead of definitions, and outrage instead of understanding. They are told what to think, not how to think. And so you see crowds chanting words they cannot define, marching against ideas they cannot explain, and in some cases turning to destruction or violence without being able to articulate what outcomes they are actually seeking. Ask a basic question: what is fascism? Ask another: what distinguishes it from authoritarianism, totalitarianism, from simple political disagreement? And too often the response is silence or anger or accusation. This is not activism. This is indoctrination meeting immaturity. The ancient Greeks would have recognized this immediately, not as moral strength, but as a failure of education. Because for them, education was meant to build character before it mobilized action. They understood that passion without reason is dangerous, that conviction without knowledge is unstable, that collective emotion without individual discipline leads not to justice, but to chaos. Carefully manipulated chaos. Chaos that can be blamed on the other side. This is how movements become mobs. This is how protest becomes performance. And this is how young people are used as instruments for agendas they do not fully understand by people who understand power very well. A society that neglects the character of its citizens does not create rebels. It creates tools. Think about it. A student afraid to speak in class. A worker self-censoring at work. A parent afraid to ask questions or bring up concerns at a school meeting. An independent influencer investigating obvious fraud in Minneapolis who then gets threatened for it. Fear-mongering at its best. And they all become the tools of the evil. And when education no longer teaches students how to think clearly, speak precisely, reason ethically, and govern their emotions, it does not liberate them. It does leave them exposed. And this is not the flowering of civic engagement. It is the evidence of cultural depletion. And it is exactly why the Greek model still matters, because it reminds us that a free society depends not on a constant outrage, but on formed minds, disciplined souls, and citizens capable of self-examination. Without that foundation, all that remains is a weaker and weaker population, loud, emotional, but easily steered, and no civilization survives on that for long. Aristotle said this: "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." And what does that mean to you? It means to me that we need to have minds that are willing to debate, to see beyond our biases, and to be able to say, I disagree, but here is why. Instead, today, you are a fascist for merely disagreeing with an agenda-driven, manufactured point of view. The fact still remains: demonstrators would not be allowed to demonstrate without a free country. Look at Iran. The citizens of Iran are revolting against the tyranny of a violent regime, and they are suffering the consequences for that revolt. Actual tyranny. So, Jimmy Kimmel, is this the tyranny you were speaking about? I really doubt it. Where are all of the student demonstrations supporting the citizens of Iran? Where are all the university demonstrators demanding the stopping of ruthless killings of Christians in Nigeria, or the terrible random killings of innocent people on subways or on the streets of major cities? Where are those demonstrations? Where is BLM when the gang killings escalate in any city? Where is Antifa? Where is any group for the issues that are truly real? The issue is only real to them if it fits a particular narrative. It's obvious. They exist only for fear-mongering and preying on ignorant, weak minds that are searching to fit in, not locating their inner self and growing, but to find a way to fit in with people who do not have their best interest at heart. And this leads us directly to the Greeks' view of democracy, with warnings, of course. Understanding that the United States of America is a republic, not a flat-out democracy. We do have strong democracy ideals, but we are really a republic. And with that in mind, ancient Greece gave the world democracy. Plato feared democracies are susceptible to mob rule, while Aristotle sought a more balanced system of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy combined. But in the end, the Greeks knew something painfully well. Freedom, in general, without wisdom, destroys itself. Order without freedom suffocates the human spirit. That tension, liberty versus order, did not end in Greece. It became the central drama of the Western civilization. One of the most misunderstood moments in history is the fall of ancient Greece. We often imagine it as a conquest, Rome marching in, overpowering a weakened civilization and erasing it. But that's not what happened. Greece did not collapse simply because Rome was stronger. Greece collapsed because it could no longer hold itself together. The ancient Greek world fractured into competing city-states, and this is very important. Each governed differently, each pursuing its own vision of the good, the just, and the true. Loyalty narrowed, identity fragmented, shared purpose dissolved. Any of this sound familiar? Athens moved one way, Sparta another, Corinth another still. There was no longer a unifying cultural spine, only competing interpretations of reality. And into that fragmentation stepped Rome. Rome did not destroy Greece, it absorbed it. Greek ideas, art, philosophy, and education lived on, but under Roman order, Roman law, Roman administration, and Roman unity. The Greeks lost sovereignty not because they lacked intelligence, but because they lacked cohesion. That pattern should again sound uncomfortably familiar. Today, the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom increasingly resemble a collection of modern city-states rather than a unified nation. In the United States, individual states are moving in sharply different directions, not merely in policy, but in values, speech norms, education, philosophy, and even interpretations of reality itself. In Canada, my Canadian friends, centralized authority increasingly clashes with provincial autonomy, while cultural consensus weakens under ideological pressure. Here is a clip from Liam Out Loud getting right to the point.
It's become fashionable for academics and activists to romanticize decolonization and for politicians to tell you to respect every culture but be ashamed of your own. Universities now celebrate indigenous wisdom as morally superior, and activists insist that modern civilization, built on science, merit, and progress, is the source of humanity's corruption. But this obsession with simpler, more authentic cultures isn't really about admiration, it's about escape. Civilization demands too much from the modern person: discipline, effort, and personal responsibility. It expects people to think critically, restrain impulses, and live by higher standards. That's a heavy weight to carry, so instead of rising to meet it, many look for an easier way out. They glorify less developed societies as pure and communal, imagining them as utopias unburdened by greed, guilt, or competition. But the picture they paint isn't based on history, it's based on fantasy. Life in so-called primitive societies was not peaceful or harmonious, it was brutal, superstitious, and often short. Disease, violence, and hierarchy were constant realities. The modern idealist, safely sheltered by the systems they claim to despise, projects their own frustrations onto a false image of the past. They're not comparing truth to truth, they're comparing a distorted present to a fictional paradise. This fantasy allows them to reject the moral and intellectual responsibilities of modern life while feeling morally superior for doing so. It's not love for indigenous cultures, it's self-loathing disguised as compassion. The irony is that the people who despise civilization rely on it completely. The freedom, safety, and prosperity that make their activism possible are products of the very system they condemn. What's really being rejected isn't Western values, it's maturity itself. It's the uncomfortable weight of having to uphold and improve what generations before us built. Civilization is demanding, yes, but that's what makes it valuable. The longing to escape isn't wisdom or enlightenment, it's regression, the wish to return to childhood where the world felt simple because someone else bore the responsibility.
In the United Kingdom, internal divisions, political, cultural, regional, strain the idea of a shared national identity. And watch what you say on social media, or, God forbid, don't pray silently near an abortion clinic. You will get what's coming to you. This is not diversity of thought. This is loss of a common framework. Ancient Greece shows us that a civilization can be extraordinarily intelligent, creative, and morally serious, and still fall apart if it cannot maintain shared principles that bind its people together. Remember, governance without cohesion is not strength. Greek city-states were proud of their independence, but independence without coordination becomes weakness. When every city-state pursued its own truth, its own justice, its own political experiment, Greece became incapable of a unified response to external threats or internal decay. Rome, by contrast, did something radical. It subordinated local identity to a shared legal and civic structure. Rome understood that freedom requires order, and order requires agreement on fundamentals, law, citizenship, duty, and responsibility. This is the uncomfortable lesson for the modern West. When governance becomes radically decentralized without a unifying moral and cultural center, power does not disappear, it simply migrates, and it migrates to those who can impose order. Absorption, it always follows fragmentation. Rome absorbed Greece because Greece could no longer defend itself as a coherent whole, not militarily, culturally, or politically. The Greeks still debated truth, still taught philosophy, still created art, but Rome built roads, Rome enforced law, Rome unified systems. In history, builders eventually overtake thinkers when thinkers refuse to build together. And okay, I'm going to say that again. In history, builders eventually overtake thinkers when thinkers refuse to build together. The modern West risks a similar fate, not necessarily through invasion, but through institutional absorption, global bureaucracies, technocratic governance, centralized regulatory authority, and cultural standardization enforced from above. When nations lose internal cohesion, they become easy to manage externally. This is not an argument for tyranny. It is not an argument against regional autonomy. And it is certainly not nostalgia for empire. It is a warning drawn from history. A civilization that cannot agree on basic principles like murder is wrong, stealing is wrong, no matter what the circumstances you are in. What is a woman? What is a man? If we cannot maintain shared meaning, if we cannot balance freedom with responsibility, we will eventually trade freedom for order. Not because we want to, but because the chaos becomes unbearable. Ancient Greece teaches us that brilliance without unity is fragile. Rome teaches us that unity without wisdom becomes rigid. The modern world must learn to hold both circumstances close to its heart, or risk losing everything. And upon close reflection, the fall of Greece was not the end of its ideas. It was the loss of independence. And that distinction matters, because civilizations rarely die suddenly. They are absorbed, many times slowly, quietly, and legally, when they forget what binds them together. History is patient, but it always collects its debts. So before you hit the streets and, disrupt ICE, think about what got you there. What is benefiting from your rage? It's easy to cast someone as a villain, but are they a villain because of evil deeds, or are they a villain because someone is losing their voting base and now cannot easily manipulate votes? Roughly 80% of Somalians in Minnesota are on public assistance versus about 7% native Minnesotans or non-Somalis. Wrap that around a staggering fraud scheme in that same state, centered around the Somalian population, and you tell me where the real issue is. Or you could stay blinded by a shooting of an admitted ICE disruptor who was obviously attempting to harm or kill someone conducting legal federal enforcement. I guess staggering frauds should just be ignored. Again, look at who's benefiting from all of this. Use what the ancient Greeks gave us: the ability to reason, the ability to think clearly and justly, the ability to openly discuss the issues, instead of allowing white, lonely, misled women to fight your battles for you. We are supposed to have a society that protects women on every level, and I, for one, will continue to do that. I believe that women and children should have our complete and continuous protection at all times. Let's not send them into manufactured battles that put them in harm's way. It's not who we are. It's not what we stand for, and it is certainly not our future. Learn from the entire Greek story. There is so much more to learn, so many warnings of what not to do. And again, humans are just that, humans. It's the same old story, but with new characters. Don't let what happened to ancient Greece happen to the US, Canada, and the UK. Let's make sure all of this wisdom they gave us will not be wasted on pronouns, cancel culture, decaying universities, separate state identities. Let's make sure that the wisdom the ancient Greeks passed on to us will help us take back the wheel and steer us in the right direction. I know the majority of us want to live in a free and open capitalist society. Do not let the loud, misguided manipulators lead us anywhere. We got this. We got the wheel if we want it, and we will have many backseat drivers, but we are strong enough to move forward. So the question is, are you willing to see the pitfalls ancient Greece shows us and defend against them? Or will you let the manipulated screamers, arrow-pointing, brick-throwing few lead us? I choose the former. What is your choice?
The ancients believed there was one power more valuable than strength, wealth, or knowledge: attention. They understood that whatever controls your attention controls your life. Plato warned that the soul weakens when attention is scattered. People do not choose their thoughts, they inherit them. They look where they are told to look. They desire what they are trained to desire. And they mistake distraction for freedom. Aristotle saw attention as the root of character. What you focus on becomes habit. Habit becomes character. Character becomes destiny. Attention was never neutral. It either strengthened the mind or slowly dissolved it. The Stoics built their discipline around this truth. Epictetus taught that suffering begins when attention is placed on what cannot be controlled: opinions, outcomes, status. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to return attention to the present moment, not as escape, as discipline. Across ancient traditions, the same warning appears. Where attention goes, identity follows. A restless mind cannot know itself. A scattered mind cannot remain free. The ancients believed this was dangerous, not because stimulation is evil, but because a mind without trained attention cannot resist influence. A person who cannot hold attention cannot hold values, cannot hold truth, cannot hold direction. This is why attention was trained deliberately, through restraint, through repetition, through silence. Attention came before choice. Before you decide what to believe, you decide what to notice. Before you act, you attend. The ancients believed reclaiming attention was the first act of self-mastery, because a person who controls their attention controls their inner world. And a person who controls their inner world cannot be easily controlled from the outside.
So, what did you think of this episode or any of the episodes? We would love to find out. And here is where to get a hold of the show and let us know. These are in the show notes, but as always, here they are. There is a support link in the show notes and on the NewVision OldWays.com website that you can click on that will allow you to donate to the show and show your support. By donating what you can, it will allow us to book guests and cover costs. Anything will help. Cancel anytime. You can also message the show from each episode on your various platforms. Just look for the Send Us a Text Message link. If that doesn't work for you, you can email us at newvisionoldways@gmail.com. You can find us on what was Twitter, now X, at NewVisionOldWay, no S on that one. Check the NewVision OldWays YouTube channel. Type in NewVision, one word, OldWays, one word, channel, and please subscribe. It is free and will show support for the show. It really means a lot and will help grow the show on YouTube. Find us on Facebook, NewVision OldWays, podcast you should easily find us. And as a reminder, these are still growing platforms for us and expanding all the time, so we need your help to get the flow going with the community. And last but not least, if you can do me a huge favor and subscribe to us, like us, follow us, leave a review on whatever platform you found us on, that would be so appreciated. That will also help secure guests that we will be booking in the future. So, welcome to the middle of Season 6, and we still have a lot to cover this season, so thank you for listening. We can't wait to get your input, and I also can't wait until we get together for the next episode of NewVision OldWays. Until then, Stay true to yourself, stay informed, and stay empowered.
But the most important thing is...
This episode and all the episodes of NewVision OldWays podcast have been written, engineered, and produced by Tony Marinaccio and TKM Productions.